We're so excited that you've joined us to listen to Casey Litsey's sermon. Now get ready for some real talk.
Turn to your neighbor and say, "Welcome to Jubilee," where everybody... Oh, y'all are terrible. Let's try that again. Where everybody... There we go. Now that's better. So it brings me joy to get up here again. It always seems like a process whenever you're getting ready to get up here. You know, like I said before, you get up here and you think, man, my notes aren't together. I don't know what the deal is. But it's just because God is wanting to speak through you, and He doesn't want you to do it. You know, I always knew as a little boy that I was called into ministry. It was almost like it was in my blood. But the thing is that it took so long and so many times to reroute to be able to step into it. I remember as a little, I was probably about 8 years old, and a guest speaker came all the way from Australia. He didn't know who I was. He knew my parents, but he didn't know that I was with them because I was sitting in the back. And he said, "You, sir, you young man, yeah, you, come here." And here I come waddling up there, what does this guy want from me? I'm just a little guy. And so he says, "You, sir, will be prophet to the nations. You have a big calling on your life, and you're going into ministry." And I looked at him like, man, are you crazy? I'm 10 years old. I still haven't lived the rest of my life yet. And so he laid hands on me, and I went out in the Spirit. And I remember God showed me a glimpse of what my future was going to be like. He showed me all these things where I was older and I was doing mighty things for the kingdom. But inside, when I woke up, I thought, ooh, I don't know about that. I don't want to do that. Because I'm scared the world might look at me a different way. They may not look at me the way that I want them to, so they're going to start looking at me a different way. And so I got up and I said, yeah, I don't know about that. I think I might just kind of run from that a little bit. And so I got older, and I started doing things on my own. And, it seemed like everywhere I would go, God would follow me. He would always follow me and remind me about my calling. It wasn't like He stepped away and said, "Oh, I told him his calling. I'm just going to leave it right there." No, He followed me everywhere. He kept following me and pursuing me and saying, "This is your calling. Step in it. Step in it." But the thing is that I was so distracted by the world. So high school rolls around, and everybody knows it's not cool to be a Jesus freak. It's not cool to be on for Jesus. You're supposed to be a part of the world. You're supposed to party. You're supposed to have sex. You're supposed to do all this stuff and not be a part of what God's called you to do. It doesn't matter. That's the way the world looks at things. And so I got distracted by this, and I was going to public schools, and I was doing wrong things. And it's so funny because God pulled me out of the public school, put me in Victory Christian Center, and I had everything where I could learn to be a better Christian. But guess what I did? I ran even farther away because I was scared of it. And so the thing was, as God kept pushing me and pushing me and pulling me, but I kept being so distracted by the world, what they offer me. Oh, look at this pretty girl. Oh, look at this. Oh, man. Let me try this marijuana. Let me do this over here. Let me get drunk. Let me just pass out. And it doesn't, but God would still protect me through all this stuff I was going through. I was walking my own path, and God was still walking with me. Because it doesn't matter where you go, God will always follow you. And so the thing is that I was so drawn by this, and I was at Victory. And when I got there, I remember the first month, for 2 months, I was on fire for God. I was ready to turn my life around. I was there, I was changing. But then, the devil will always trick you and deceive you. All he's got to do is send somebody on your path that you like, that you're fond of, and then you'll step with them and walk with them all the way away from God. He'll take you far away, and you'll distance yourself. You'll keep growing farther and farther. And then God is still telling you, hey, you're called over here. Why won't you do this? I mean, are you deaf? But the thing is that he just keeps pushing you and pushing you and pushing you to go the direction of what you want to go. But I was so distracted by what everybody gave me at school. And the next thing I know, I was running with bad kids. Next thing I know, I was partying every weekend. Next thing I know, I was getting high before chapel. I remember I got so high one time, I thought the guy was floating as he was speaking up there at chapel. And I thought, man, I'm going to hell. Somebody's going to send me to hell doing this. But the thing was, is that God, he saw me do this and he still walked with me. He didn't leave me just because of my sin. You know, the world tries to tell us that, you know, like these preachers that are they have these denominations. They'll tell you, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. But the thing is that we have to love people through their sin. You can't push them away. Otherwise, they will run farther. Because that's what I did. See, they would get in my face. They'd say, you're a sinner. You're a sinner. You're no good. You're a troublemaker. If one more time, one more outburst out of you, and I'll expel you from this school. One more time, just one more time. They never showed me grace. All they did was look at me like everybody else, and they had to make an example of me. The moment I messed up is the moment they would point at me and say, that guy right there, he messes up one more time, he's expelled. He's not meant to be here. And the thing is that the enemy will use them against you, and he'll tell them, you know, why don't you tell this guy he's not called to ministry? He's rough. He's not hearing this. He's partying. He's this. He's that. He's not called. You know, they did the same way with Jesus. They did the same way with him. They said, he's not the Son of God. Who is he? Who is he to lay these hands on people? Who is he to do these miracles? That man's a witchcraft. He's not a God. But that's the way they look at us. That's the way the world will look at us when we're running in sin. They don't look at us and love us through and say, hey, look, you know, I see you're going through a hard time. I don't know your story, but I want to help you. I want to step in. I want to guide you. I want to direct you instead of condemn you. I want to be there for you. But, you know, instead, so I didn't believe that I had a calling during this process because of the fact of what people would say to me. How they'd tell me, you're not called. You think you're called to ministry? Look who you're running with. They thought the farther I got from God, that God would be away from me. But it doesn't matter how far you run. If you got a calling on your life, God will keep with you until you do it. And the thing is, if you are so distracted by objects, people, and all that, he'll start taking them away from you because he's a jealous God. He'll step over them. He'll push them out of your way. They'll never be a part of your life because he wants all your attention. He wants you to put him first, not put him second. You know, we say, well, we're supposed to put our house first. No. You're supposed to put God first and then your house. People think, oh, well, I got to put my marriage first. You know, it comes first. It says that. No. You put God first and then your marriage second. See, the thing is that we have the tendency to think, oh, I got to do this. I got to put my marriage first because otherwise it's just going to crumble. Well, let me tell you something. If you don't put God first, everything else will crumble around you. And you will not have a firm foundation to stand on because you'll be sinking sand, just like it says. You know, we feel like God interrupts our story. He keeps interrupting my life, my future. The problem is we have the wrong perspective. It's the opposite. Every time you delay what God told you to do, every time you disobey, God has told you to do something. It's not that he is interrupting your story. It's that you're interrupting his story. God has a story, and he's waiting for you to get on board so he can tell his story. So tonight I want to talk to you about running but called. And this brings us to the first point. Running from God will become miserable and tiring. I remember the more I ran from God, the more I ran from him, the more I felt empty. I didn't feel fulfilled. There was something missing. But whenever we get in our calling and not God's calling, we have that feeling of in our heart like, what is the deal? I'm doing something good. I'm doing great things, but something inside of me is still feeling empty. Well, because you weren't meant to do that. God called you a different route, but you chose your own route. And so we get that feeling, you know, and God gives you a word. Maybe it came through a sermon. Maybe it came directly from the Bible. Maybe it came from some spiritual influence in your life. Maybe you heard it from him directly. And he's told you this is what you're supposed to do. This is what I want you to do, but you don't like it. It's not your preferred course of action. Kind of like how I did. I ran from it because I didn't like it. I didn't like what he called me to do. I said, listen, I want to go, I want to go party. I want to go to college. I got all these plans figured out. I don't need to do this. I can do it this way. And God says, no, 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 no. You're called to do this, not that. You got logical reasons why God doesn't know what he's talking about. We think that we know more than God. We think that we know our future better than God. But let me tell you something. He's the director of the movie, and he knows the ending before you do. So there's some people tonight. They may get mad at God on what God demanded or expected. They run from the presence of the Lord. They stop going to church. Perhaps you know people around you that say, I'm not going to church anymore because they don't want to do what God demands or expects. Because every time you're running from God, you feel the guilt. Whenever you're around people that are in the Word, that are spiritually, and they hear, you're in guilt. You feel guilty. You feel, oh, I know I'm running. I know I'm running. And then God will send people on your path to tell you you're running. But we don't, but the thing is that we hear it, and then about 10 minutes later, we forget about it. But then it comes back to us again at another thing. See, I ran from it. I remember like when I got out of school, God told me to go into real estate. I did it. But the thing was what he told me to do and which I didn't do. He said, I want you to go into real estate. I want you to learn this business. And then I want you to step into ministry. And I said, God, this is what I'll do. God, if you help me succeed in real estate, I will go into ministry. Now, God did his part, but I didn't do mine. I took the advantage of, I'm climbing so fast in real estate, I don't need ministry anymore. I can minister to people in real estate. And then the next thing I know, my business started slowing down, getting stagnant. Things started changing. And I said, what is going on? Well, it's that agreement that we signed, that I signed with God and said, I'll join real estate. I'll do ministry, God, if you help me in real estate. He held his end of the bargain, but I didn't hold mine. Can you imagine if we did that with legal terms in a contract? I want you to do this. I'm going to have you go into ministry, and I'll take care of your real estate. But if you disobey, then you can get sued for it, right? Because that's legal terms. Can you imagine how many times we'd be sued from God from things that we disobeyed and didn't do? It would change the way we looked at things. So people, they don't go to church. They run from it. They say, I'm not wanting to hear it. I know I'm supposed to do this. I don't want to hear it. And they stop going to church altogether because they don't want to be in the presence. They don't want to be reminded of his calling on their life. So they stay home. We all know people like that, where they're called to do mighty things, and then all of a sudden, they run home. And the next thing you know, you're like, hey, why don't you come to church this week? Oh, I would, but I'm watching this new show, or I got dinner reservations. I'm working overtime. I got all these excuses of why they can't go to church. But really, it's because they're running from God. But see, most people won't tell you this. Running from God will cost you. It costs you time. It costs you money. It can cost your health. It can cost your peace. It can cost your joy. It can cost your sense of well-being. It can cost your progress. It can cost your unity. It can cost your harmony. It can cost your mental stability. Running from God's calling is disobedience. Disobedience is just as bad as any sin. But we don't hear that in the church usually. We hear that the sins are bad, but we don't hear nothing about disobeying. And I guarantee you there's people in here tonight that are disobeying God. Well, let me tell you, that's just as bad as sin. And I'm going to break it down to you. It says 1 Samuel 15:23. If you have your Bibles. It says, you sin if you refuse to obey the Lord. This sin is as bad as to do evil magic. You think that you know better than God. That is a sin which is like worshiping idols. You refuse to obey what the Lord said. Now the Lord has refused you as king. Man, that hurts, doesn't it? And then I'm going to read this in the Dake translation. It says, "For rebellion is a sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is an iniquity and adultery, because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king." Mm. So I wanted to break this down even more. It says, obedience is more important than all forms of religion, sacrifices, offering rituals, and ceremonies. It is the chief end of all true religion, and stubbornness, our manifestation of failure and conforming to the truth. For rebellion is sinful as witchcraft, and self-will is as wicked as having idols. See, when we don't obey from God, we're just as bad as somebody doing witchcraft. And I can attest to this, because sometimes I feel like when you're getting ready to preach on a sermon, God will start letting you walk through these processes to see if you can practice what you preach. So I'm laying in bed Monday, and it's like, I don't know, I went to bed probably 11 o'clock, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, I start hearing this voice, real soft, "Casey, Casey, Casey." And then I wake up, and I hear it again, "Casey." And I said, "Oh, man, that's God speaking." And so I sit up, and I'm like, "What is going on?" And I hear in my spirit, "Go to the living room." And I walk into the living room, and I said, "Here I am, God, your faithful servant. I hear you. What would you have me do?" He said, "I was just seeing if you would obey me." That's all he was doing. Wasn't going to tell me some big word. He just wanted to see if I would obey him. See, God's call disrupts our lives. We start, we have our whole future planned out. By 20, I'm going to be in college. 25, I'm going to have my career. 26, I'm going to go into the medical field. 27, I'm going to be so successful. I'm going to have this beautiful house, this white picket fence. I'm going to have a dog named Max. I'm going to have, I'm going to have a cat named Bella. I'm going to drive this car. I'm going to have these type of clothes. I'm going to have these. And we just start planning our future without even talking to God. And so we start packing our bag of everything that we had in store. And we take our bag because we know our calling, right? We take our bag and we say, "I'm out of here. I'll see you, God. We'll see you later. I'm going a different direction." But what we don't realize is that, during the process of us running from him, we start emptying out everything of what we gained, what we packed in our bag, all of our careers, all of our money, all of our stuff that we had planned for us. And the next thing you know, we're empty, and we're back searching again. "Oh, God, here I am. I'm ready to obey you again. I went through the ringers, God, and I know I'm running, but hey, God, how about, instead of this time, how about instead of being a doctor, I'll become an attorney? How about that, God? Or I'll be a comedian, God. I don't want to go into ministry, God, but I'll do all these other things. How about that, God? I'll start packing my bag, and I'll start going the same direction I just went. I'll go that direction, God. You'll be there with me, right?" And you don't hear nothing, because he's already told you what you're supposed to do. God doesn't sit here and want to repeat himself. Do you like repeating yourself? I know when I tell somebody to do something and I want something done, I expect it done. I'm sure everybody does. But God is gracious with us, and he says, "All right, fine. You want to pack the bag again? Go right ahead. I'll see you whenever you get to the other side." And then he'll wait for us at the other side. What do you think? Are you done running? You think you want to go down the career I picked for you? I saw how you were walking away, and you started feeling so empty. The farther you got, the emptier you felt. Oh, it must be because I called you to something else and not that. The thing is that this brings me to the next slide. God foreknew before you knew. If you go to Romans 28 through 30, it says, "And we know that for those who love God, All things work together for those who are called according to his purpose, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those who he justified, he also glorified. So if you break this down even more, it says, while all things work together, God's providence is working in behalf of them who love God and who walk obediently according to his purpose. Not your purpose, God's purpose. And then I'm going to break this down where it says, because it said to know, it said foreknow, which means to know beforehand. Know before, foreknow, foreordain, and know is under God's foreknowledge and determined before and predestined. So he's already has our life planned out. He's already got the plan. He's predestined us to be at some certain place already. We don't have to plan for ourselves. And it also says for the next one, it says, God pre-planned and predestined my life. He foreknew you out of the basis of that foreknowledge before. He did predestinate you. He prepared you in advance before predestined, destination, ending. So he's already has our story planned out. See, he set things in motion to accommodate what he foreknew. Because foreknew, he predestined an environment that would cause you to be rejected out of several places so that you would not rest below your destiny. He disrupted your circumstances. He moved your life around and ordered your steps. That's why you never fit in. That's why you felt like you didn't belong with the friends you had. That's why they would leave you eventually, because they weren't part of your purpose. They weren't part of your destiny. And whenever you're called places, you don't fit in anywhere. If I fit in everywhere with everybody, do you think anybody would want to sit here and listen to me? They wouldn't want to listen to me. God wouldn't take me to higher places if I'm sitting here involved with everybody. He called us to step out and be different. Not like the world, but be different. He set you apart from them. He called you to higher levels of life. If he called you to fit in, you wouldn't stand out. That's why when you're called, you won't fit in, like I just said, because you have much bigger purpose on your life. He determined of the life of rejection you felt. A lot of us probably felt rejection, like we feel like, I don't fit in. I feel so rejected by them. Well, let me go be a part of this group. Oh, I feel rejected by them too. How about over here? Oh, rejected again. And it's a process that keeps repeating itself because we're called to much higher places. He prescribed the level of intensity of your pain so that you would have enough conviction when you got up to be forceful about it. So when you get done running and you pop up, you're forceful about it. You're like, I'm here. I'm ready for my calling. I'm stepping in. This is it. I'm moving forward. I'm not moving backwards again. He pulled you back far enough so that you would shoot forward enough on the basis of his foreknowledge. So if I'm one of them, it's all good. You left me, it's all good. I'm wondering why I don't fit in. I'm wondering why you left me, but it's all good. I'm wounded, it's all good. Because God's going to use the fact that you left me and the pain I have about it to push me into my purpose. That he's predestined so you couldn't stay. You had to go. Because you came in my life because you had a role to play. Those he did foreknow, those he did also predestine, and them he also called. Called is the hinge to the text. He could foreknow me and me not know it. A lot of us could be called and we don't even know it because we're out of the will of God. We're not searching for what God wants us to do. We're running away from it. So we could be we could sit here and think, well, what is my calling? Where do I go? But if you're not under the presence of God, how can you know your calling? You can't. He could predestine me and me not know it. This is all stuff that's done in the kitchen before the customer gets the entree. This is God's divine prep work. It's all happened in the spirit world before you got here. But called cannot be done independent from me. In other words, I have to be willing to step into my calling. God's not going to force me to do it. He's not going to say, I'm going to kill you if you don't step in your calling. He's not like that. He's graceful. He's patient with us. So let me break this down. Just like when we go eat, right? When we go to a restaurant, even though I can't see the chef prep the meal, I'm the beneficiary of the preparation he did where I couldn't see it. He's been marinating it all night. When he brings it to me, I benefit from what he pre-marinated in the back of the kitchen. From a preheated oven, from a predetermined place, when he brings it to me, I am presented what he has prepared for me before at the point he called me. Listen, I don't want y'all to miss this. Benefit of the text is the invisible information of the text. The ideology of the text, of the implication of the text is you're significant. You're significant. Did you hear me? You're all significant. Because you don't put that much prep work into something that's insignificant. The calling is when he makes you aware of not only did I prep for you, but also the side effects of the information is that I am significant. God made us all stand out. He made us all stand out in our own way. There's people that you can talk to, people that I can't talk to. There's people that I can talk to and that you'll never talk to. Because we're supposed to do our own realm, not follow somebody, not be like everybody else. Let me preach what such and such is on TV. Let me preach how he did. Let me do, like what's his name on TV. Let me follow his footsteps. I want to be like this celebrity. I want to be like that celebrity. No, God called us to step in our own will, in our own purpose, not be in somebody else's purpose. But most of us don't know that. That's why we turn to drugs. That's why we turn to alcohol, to find the escape, the feeling of being so low about ourselves. We abuse our bodies because I didn't know I was significant. That's why I did all these drugs. That's why I snorted up all this cocaine. That's why I slept with whoever, because I didn't know I was significant. I didn't know that I had purpose. I didn't know that I was anything. I didn't know who I was. That's why I gave myself to anybody who wanted me, who was fascinated that they liked me, because I didn't know I was significant. And if you don't know you're significant, you'll give yourself to anybody. Look at someone and say, he called me. Rusty, come here. You know why I called him and nobody else? Why none of you thought that? Hold on. I lost my spot. You know why he came and nobody else came? Because I called him. And did you know I planned for him to be in the same spot where he's standing right now? I predestined the environment for him to be in that same spot because I called him. I knew that he was going to be in the very back and he would have to obey me to walk this far, just so I could illustrate this to all of you about stepping in and obeying. Because imagine if he said, no, I don't want to do it. He could sit back there and then I'm standing up here like, dang, I got to find somebody else. But see, that's the thing, is that if you're not careful, God will find somebody else to take your spot. He won't wait for you to get it all together. He'll be gracious with you, but it's just like us. How long can you wait for someone to be gracious? You're good, Rusty. Thank you. Let's give him a hand. See, you don't call nobody you don't want. Now, somebody might wonder to you that you don't want, but you don't call nobody that you don't want. You don't call anybody you don't have a plan for. You don't call anybody without a purpose. You don't call anybody and then say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with you. Can you imagine if God said that to us? Oh, I called you, but I don't know what I'm going to do with you yet. I'm not sure. I haven't figured it out yet. We'd be in a world full of trouble. If you got good sense, you had the purpose before you called the person. Wonder who you are. I wonder who you are that he called. That he would put so much labor and work into setting the path for you. The details are in the prep work. The circumstances you had to be right, the age had to be determined, the error had to be determined, the gender had to be determined, the community had to be determined, the exterior of your look, your walk had to be determined. Your body build, your body language, your IQ, your intellect, all of that had to be pre-planned by God for him to use you in the way he wanted to use you. None of this just happened predetermined, preset from before the foundations of the world. Look at what he told Jeremiah. In Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, foreknew, I knew you. And before you were born, I sanctified, I set apart, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. And then you got God knew, approved you, and sanctified you, set apart, and ordained, commissioned you before you were born. He already had the plan for you before you were even born. All you had to do is just step into it. That's where you would find your fulfillment. That's where you would find your purpose. See, we search so long and we think, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, you know what it is. You're just not doing it. He meant for us not to fit in. I set you apart. They couldn't like you. They couldn't keep you. They couldn't raise you. I meant for you to be a misfit. I meant for you to stand out. I meant for you to search for love you couldn't find and peace you couldn't touch and joy you couldn't hold on to. It was all a setup. He called you, blew you into your spirit, blew your spirit into your body. Let that particular sperm cell outswim all the rest of the overlay eggs from the body, blew the spirit into the body time, now reigns over your body, not your spirit. Your spirit doesn't care what day it is. It doesn't have a birthday. It has no death date. It has no beginning, end of days. It is your spirit that has been created in the likeness of God. He called you into a body. Here's the price you paid for answering that call to be born. You would forget who you were in the spirit. So once your spirit touched your body and it came to earth, you would forget who you were, that God called you to be. See, in the spirit realm, you already knew who you were. You already knew. But the moment you touch earth, that is where confusion hits you, and that's where you don't know. And that's when the searching begins, and you start searching, well, who am I? Who am I? And that's when God tells you what he wants you to do. So when he called you from eternity into time, you now got a body, but you can't remember who you were in the spirit. So the search is on. The search through lovers, lust, drugs, alcohol, sex, money, fame, recognition, fortune, prosperity, individuality. You're trying to find that thing that's missing until you get the next call where he calls you again to remind you of your purpose. See, the thing is we think that even though we're called to this purpose, that God isn't going to walk with us. We worry that God isn't going to be there with us, but let me tell you, he is. He holds your hand the whole way. All you got to do is walk with him. But let me tell you, let me break this down to you. The moment you stop hearing from God is the moment you're walking out of your calling. You're walking out of your purpose. Because when you're in your purpose, you can hear from God. When you're in your purpose, you don't feel guilt. When you're in your purpose, God will tell you to do things. He'll smooth things over for you. And you're able to do things that you weren't able to do by yourself because you're walking in your purpose. So you're trying to find that thing that's missing until you get the next call where you're called again to remind you of your purpose. God guides you through your purpose. He is with us, directing every step. That's why it says in Psalms 32, 8 through 9, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. But not like a horse or a mule without understanding, which must be curbed with a bit or a bridle, or it will not stay near you. He's telling us right there that he's not going to force us to do it. Because if you ever rode a horse, you can make a horse go wherever you want it to go. You're in control. You can do whatever you want with it. If you want it to go left or right, it doesn't matter. But God is different. He's gracious with us. And he says, okay, let's go this way. And either you follow it or you don't. He gives you a choice. And that's why in this verse it says, I will teach you the way to live. I will guide and I will take care of you. Don't be like a silly horse or a mule. You have to use a rope to tell them which way to go. Without that, they will not obey you. See, that's why when you obey, all of a sudden, he starts showing you a glimpse of almost like you're spinning around in a bar stool. If I lost my note, I'd spin too many times. And you say it's not that, you say it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. He says, now forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth those things which are before you. He called you into the body of Christ. You must be born again. One of the waters, one of the Spirit, born again, again, again. It's happening again. The whole process is happening again. The closer I get into who I am, I must forget of who I was in the past. I'm shedding off what I had before that I might capture what I have new of me now. And now I'm called into the body of Christ the second time, the third time. I'm called on my purpose, my thing. I get so much out of it, I'll do it for free. When you know that you're in your purpose, you won't say, man, I wish I was making money doing this. You already know that it's going to happen because you know that you're in your purpose, that you do it for free. Let me tell you, though, when you get that third call, that's a mind-boggling thing because you find that thing that satisfies your spirit. You might make money from it, but the money is not the goal. It is the byproduct of finding the purpose. You don't have to pay the biggest price to the biggest calling. God puts us in puts us in our own box of our own callings. You don't have to be the president of the United States to be somebody important. The call doesn't have to be a big thing to be important either. If all you do is you're a janitor and you're sweeping floors all day, but you're leading people to Christ and you're happy doing it, then that's what he called you to do. And the sad thing is that if that person is called and you get a preacher that is not called, I guarantee you the janitor will lead more people to Christ than the preacher would. The problem here is you're trying to get something big because you draw being important from people. Some of you are forsaking your calling, trying to find something big and impressive so that people will think you're important. You think like, well, if I'm so important, God will do this for me. He'll do these things. He'll make me look this way. He'll give me this. So then people will think I'm so important. But let me tell you, that janitor that is in his calling, he's more important than you are. Because he stepped into his purpose while you're over here dreaming, you know what? If God only gave me this house, I could have a huge table and invite everybody over and I could fellowship the gospel. But God didn't call you to live in a house. He called you to live somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? He called us to do these different things. But the thing is that we're running from it. But that janitor over here is sweeping the floors and he's happy as can be, minding his own business, leading people to Christ. See, what gives me fulfillment is not how big it is. It fits my purpose. I'm plugged in. I'm connected to it. That's what makes me fulfilled. Let me tell you something. You're only important. Let me tell you something. People think you're important will not raise your self-esteem. That's why it's called self-esteem. Until I think important to myself, nobody else will think important to me. They'll still keep looking at the way I'm looking at myself. That's why it's called self-esteem. Until you think highly of yourself, me thinking highly of you will never be enough. You got to believe that what you're called to do is important. Let me tell you this, if you don't do small things with excellence, you will never get big things. Because he says, I'm going to start you small. You're going to start here. You're going to get training. You're going to do it this way. We're going to test your obedience. And if you do that, then I'm going to make you go higher and higher and higher because I can trust you. It's almost like whenever you're in a agreement with somebody and they want to come be a part of what you're doing, they're wanting to be in your business, they want to do this, and they're so excited for you, and then you test them. See, just like God is going to test us to see how obedient we'll be. Because what would it be like if we had this business and then all of a sudden our friend comes in, he says, "Oh man, I want to be a part of this. I'm going to do this with you. I'm going to do that with you." And then you're like, "No, no, 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 no. You're going to start small, just like everybody else. You don't get a pass just because you're my friend. You don't get a pass because I know you. How do I know what type of work ethic you got? You're only telling me from what I heard. You're not telling me, you're not showing me of what you can do. You're only telling me." And little by little, as you become more spiritual, you are becoming more aware of whose you are and who you really are to be. You will feel like you're not missing anything. You won't care what trials are in front of you because you know that God is with you and He hears you. He guides, directs your steps. You know your outcome. They don't know it. He wrote the story already. So you'll go places you never could go before. When the Lord is with you, He'll open doors that no man can shut. He'll take you places where you never thought you would be. Instead of you trying to do it yourself, it's much faster if you do it with God because He directs your steps. Just like David said, He directs my steps. He directs my path. He knows exactly where I need to go. Because if we did it, see, we'd be like, "Oh, God, I think I'm going to do it this way. God, I don't like your way. I'm going to do it this way. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it, not the way you want to do it. I'm going to do it how I want to do it." And that's why we become empty and we think, "Man, I just don't understand. I mean, I'm doing things for God. I'm volunteering at the orphan's house. I'm giving money to the homeless. I'm doing all this stuff. But something inside me just doesn't feel right." It's because we were running the whole time from our purpose and we weren't doing what God told us to do. So no matter how good you do things, no matter how good you are to people, it doesn't matter because when God tells you to do something and you're not doing it, you're still in disobedience. I mean, what would it be like if we got to heaven and we're standing in front of God and God tells us, "Now, how come you weren't in ministry?" Well, God, I just, I was in real estate. I really liked it. I saw business opportunities, and I just, I prayed. I read my Bible. I went to church, God. I did all these things you told me to do, God. Well, doesn't that make me still good? Doesn't that make me still God? And God said, "No, I called you to be in ministry. I didn't call you to do this. I called you to do what I called you to do, and you disobeyed me. You went the route you wanted to go and not the route I planned for you." And so you know, so you won't care what trials are in front of you whenever you're following with God. He knows your outcome. They don't know it. You'll go places you never could go by yourself. The Lord will continue to open those doors for you that you never thought you could open. I'll start to close with this. I try to keep this a little shorter since it's Wednesday night, but this sermon was long. And I said, well, we'd be here till 10 o'clock if I didn't do the other half. So I'm cutting it down so that way everybody can go home early. I just couldn't understand why He called me. I had a lot of excuses. I was scared to talk in front of people. I felt like I had a speech impediment. Whenever I was graduating high school, the devil tried to withhold my calling from me. I remember we were in, it was like the last week of school, and it was in front of everybody in the auditorium. And he was calling up random people saying, well, what has God done in your life? Well, me, I wasn't doing a part of what God was telling me to do. I was going the total opposite direction, and I was getting in trouble, and I was doing bad things, but I was having a good time doing it. And he looks back there and he says, "Hey, you, Casey, come here real quick." And I'll never forget, he handed me the microphone. And he said, "What has God done in your life?" And I looked at everybody and I went like this. Uh, 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 what has God done in my life? And I'll never forget, my friends were looking at me. They saw sweat just pouring down me. And I said, and he goes, well, what has God done good in your life? And I said, he led me to victory. He put food on the table for me. I was looking for all these excuses to get out of that. See, because the devil knew that I had a calling in my life, and he knew that if I can scar him at a young age, he'll never into his purpose. He'll never step into it because I'll scar him where he'll never come up. He'll never stand. He'll never preach. He'll never do it because he'll be so scared of it. See, that scarred me so bad that when I got into real estate, I developed a stutter. I couldn't talk in front of people. I was scared to. That's one reason why God took me into real estate so that I could learn to talk, how I could learn to persuade, how I could learn to sell people on things, how I could learn to present myself. But the thing was that the devil had that plan for me. And since I was disobeying God, it was allowed to happen. It was allowed to happen. God allowed it to happen because I was not in his will. I was not in his purpose. I was in my own. I was doing my own thing. So I get into real estate, and I'll never forget, I was just starting to mentor and be mentored under somebody, and he told me, he said, "Man, you can't talk." I said, "How in the world are you supposed to sell real estate?" And I said, I'm trying, I had a bad mumble. I would mumble a lot. I'll never forget it. A client was with us, and he asked me, he said, "Well, what do you think of this?" And I was like, I think, I think it's sell for this. What do you think? I didn't know what I was saying. But the thing is because I was so scarred. I was so scarred by the devil. The devil scarred me so bad. And then I remember after I started getting a little bit more comfortable and I started looking and saying, "Okay, God, I think I might, step into my calling now. I don't like being this way." And I told God I would step into my calling. But then guess what? The devil put me on another route. He said, "Oh, this guy likes to make money. This guy likes nice things. Well, let me just detour him a little bit more. Let me make him go this route and let him step farther away from God." You see, he healed me of my speech impediment. But then the devil could use that too as my advantage because I was still out of the will of God. So he took me on this route and he said, here's this money, here's this fun, here's this, here's that. And then my purpose was back there. I was thinking, and I'm still in the back of my mind, see, because I made the agreement with God that I would preach and I would step into my calling. All he had to do was heal me. All he had to do was show me that I'm able to do it. And I continue to run from it so far. It was so funny because I'd be out sitting all weekend long, and then I'd come sit right there on the front row with everybody else. And everybody would, they'd think I was some good Christian boy, but they didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. See, when you have a calling on your life and the devil knows it, he knows your weakness. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what you're going to do, how you're going to react to things. Because when you're out of the will of God, that's when he'll start speaking to you and telling you to do these things. And then he'll send people in your path to persuade you to go a different route. "Hey, man, come on this vacation with us, man. Come on, we're going to get so drunk, we're going to get plastered, we're going to fall over, it's going to be a great time." And then the next thing, you'll be going on a different route. And then something will happen where all of a sudden you're not going to church anymore because you feel so guilty. You're like a sinner. You're just, I'm doing all this guilt. But God is so gracious that he doesn't look at everything of how we sin. All he does is love us. He loves us through the sin. But see, it was programmed in me because I was in the devil's will of me doing things how he wanted me to do things because I wasn't following God's purpose. And so he was persuading me to go this other route while God was over here saying, "Hey, what about our agreement?" And I'm going the total opposite direction. And we step so far out, and then we get so emptied out because the devil comes to kill, steal, destroy. And if he can't kill you, he'll destroy you. And let me tell you something. Being destroyed is worse than being dead because you're still alive and you still have to feel it. So I started walking away from my purpose, my calling, and I kid you not, people would come up to me at church. I'd be, hungover, and I would not want to be here, but I would come. I'd just come, to support my family. I wanted to be here, but there was something inside of me that kept drawing me towards church. It was something that just kept pushing me, pushing me, and pushing me. But I would just be in the front, and I'd still, I'd be wearing my suits all the time, and I think, man, people think I'm a businessman where I wear these suits. No, I remember one time I was at an event, and this guy comes stumbling up. He's just hammered. He said, "Man, it's a nice suit you got. You look like you're about to go preach." And I thought, "You got to be kidding me." No matter how far I ran from God, he still reminded me of what I was supposed to do. I would put that suit on and say, "Everybody's going to think I'm a businessman." But then everybody else looked at me and they said, "That's a preacher." Didn't matter. Didn't matter what I thought. It mattered what God put in me. But the moment I stepped into my purpose and I started walking towards God, things started changing my life. I would sit, recap on that. I would sit on the front row, and I remember I would feel so far out of God's will that when someone would call on me to get up here and pray over the offering or pray at the closing of the service, I'd say, "No way. Don't pick me. God's going to strike me down, and I'm going straight to hell if I get up there and talk," because of the way I was living. But God would always use people to push me in easy. He never was like just shoving me and pushing me hard where I'd get scared of it, slowly easing me in. Pray over the offering. Pray over this. Do this in the church. Help with this. And the next thing I know, I was walking in my calling. I was starting to step in it. And I'll never forget, it was about 2 years ago. I'll never forget, I was sitting at Tally's. I was sitting across from Papa and Grandma, and it got quiet. And then all of a sudden, something fell out of my mouth. It said, "Hey, if you ever want me to preach sometime, you just let me know." And I said, surely they didn't hear that. And it was so funny because they were like, "Oh, preach? Oh, yeah, you let us." I said, "Yeah, just, let me know." I just blew it off. I didn't think they'd actually call on me to preach. But God had other plans. He started softening their hearts and saying, "Pick this date for him. Have him preach this time." And that's what happened, is that he started easy guiding me in. Get up there and pray over the offering. Do this for the church. Do that. Just easing in. And the next thing I knew, God showed me. He was like, before I preached that first time, I remember I came here and I said, "God, this is my first time doing this. I'm stepping into your purpose of what you called me to do. I can't do this on my own, and you have the full capability to do it. So I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to obey you and do it." And so I step into my calling, and I never forget. I mean, I shocked everybody. No one even thought I could preach. And then the first message rolled away. After that, I was good a couple weeks. I was still on fire for God. But then I was still kind of weak. And so the devil kind of saw the weakness of what I had, and he tried to persuade me again, causing me all these issues, causing problems everywhere. Everywhere I would go, I felt like I just had a bag of problems, and a great cloud was over me. And I'm sitting here saying, "God, you called me to do this, but yet why am I still in this storm? What is going on?" And the thing is that I did step into my calling that first time, but then I started stepping out of it because I was like, "Oh, I'm going to get distracted by this. I got this going, I got that going." And so I started to kind of sway from it, you would say. And I had so many personal problems going on in my life that I got so distracted by them. My business wasn't going right. Relationships in my life weren't going right. And God was sitting here saying, "Hey, man, if you just put me first, I promise all this stuff will work out. It will all work out. You just have to trust me." But me, I thought, "Oh, no, I know better than God. I better go fix that." And so I'd walk over there and try to fix these things. But God was telling me, "Hey, just focus on me. Step into what I told you to do, and everything will work together for good." And so as I started stepping in, things started changing in my life. It was so amazing. I remember, like, this second time I told God I would preach, and I really stepped into it. It was like I got up on stage, And God told me, he said, see, this is your calling, but I put you in real estate so that way you can learn how to better the church, not just yourself. I gave you that gift so that you can help the church. I taught you how to do marketing. I taught you how to do this in real estate, but little did you know you were going to be doing it in the church. Little did you know I was going to show you how to grow things, how to change things, how to step in, how to make things work, how to get more in the times. But I was so blinded that I thought, oh, I'm learning this for real estate. But God always has a bigger purpose for us. It wasn't for real estate. It was to better his kingdom. But so many times God gives us these gifts to do this amazing stuff, and we use it for ourselves. We don't use it for God. We use it for ourselves. We think, oh, God gave me this amazing gift to make this bag. I'm going to make this bag. It's going to be great. I'm going to sell a bunch of them. But little did I know that he showed me how to make this bag so that way I could sell it, tithe off of it, and better the kingdom instead of pocketing it. Because let me tell you this, when it comes to tithing, your money will always be blessed. It will always be blessed when you tithe. 10% like clockwork. And I remember, when I started making good money and, oh man, I remember looking at those tithes, I thought, golly, the church needs this much? And I thought, what about if I just pocket about half of it? He said, He said, you want your money to be blessed, right? And I said, yes, I do. And so I would tithe and God would multiply it. He would just keep going up and up and up. But whenever I was running from God, I wasn't tithing. I was just giving little offerings here, what I made, to give, 1% of what I made or give -%. And it was like my money was cursed. I remember it would just burn through. Everything would just burn through. It was like I had all these expenses, cars problems. I had to fix things all the time. Something would break down and I'd have to repair it. But then whenever I would tithe, God would bless it. He would bless it. He would keep it safe. No matter if I was making a little bit and I tithed on it, oh, God would bless it and multiply it and keep growing. It's so crazy though how God can use anybody that is just willing. If you're willing to step in your purpose, he'll use you. And so the thing is, like, a lot of us were like, well, I want to have a purpose. I want to do God's will, but I'm running from it. And let me tell you this, it's never too late to stop running. It's never too late. And I'm going to close with this. I didn't feel, because I didn't stutter, but I had a list of areas where I felt inadequate. And I always felt disqualified when I would preach or whenever I was called to preach or anything. Like the devil would use my weakness against me because I didn't know how to trust God through my problems. And so, because of humility is the frame from feeling inadequate. When you say I'm not enough, it makes you pray harder. It makes you seek harder. It makes you ask for more grace. So it doesn't matter my weakness. He made me strong. My strength is valid. So he chooses fragile, broken, limited people. It's not our talent. It's not our skills. But it's through Christ that gives us strength to do his will. What makes God so real is knowing that he can work with such poor material. He can work with such poor material. The crazy thing is that God can use someone that's just coming out of sin versus somebody that has been in the church and been in the deal, but they're not in God's will. But that sinner says, you know what? I'm going to step in my purpose. I know what I'm doing. And God can use him more than he can use the Christian that goes to church every Sunday, gets up here and speaks in tongues and does everything and goes out in the Holy Spirit. It doesn't matter because that Christian is not willing to step into his purpose. He's not willing to do it. But the sinner said, I'll step in. I'll do it. I got all this baggage, but I know that you called me to look forward and not behind me. And so I will step and keep walking towards my purpose. So God uses broken people It's almost like Michelangelo painting the chapel with a broken brush. How he painted that whole chapel with a broken brush. I am the brush. You're the brush. We're all brushes. He chooses broken brushes so that there will be no glory to the brush, only the artist when the master paints. He chooses broken brushes so that there will be no glory to the brush. Some of you may be able to relate to this story and can say, that's me. I ran from my calling, but I feel like it's just too late. All it takes is an act of obedience. All it takes is an act of obedience to step in and do what God would have you do. And I'm closing with this, if everybody would stand. You know that, like I said, you may think, I'm too old for my calling. I'm too far in sin. I'm way out of the will of God. I don't know if I can ever make it back. But see, God, but the Lord, He told the story. He said, out of the 100 sheep, and that one sheep is missing, I go after him. Even though there's 99 others, I still go after him because he's the missing one. And with that being said, most of us are wandering away from God. We're wandering so far away that we don't know if we'll ever make it back. But just like the sheep, He guides us right back to where we need to be. With nobody looking around tonight, and everybody close their eyes. You know, it's not a bad thing to say, I ran, but here I am to stand and move forward in my calling. If you feel like you ran from your calling and you feel like you want to make things right with God, I ask that you raise your hand. God sees that hand. Now, in order to take on this calling, you must be born again. If there's anyone in here tonight that does not have Christ in their heart, raise your hand. I believe everybody in here is saved then.
Thank you for joining us today to listen to Casey Litsey's sermon. Don't forget, stop running because you are called.